Holy shit, that hurt, Monica. You just stabbed your claws into my back like that.
Okay, so for the three of you that noticed, no, I did not post on Saturday. We were having some jackhammering done, and there was just no way I was gonna have quiet to film. So skipped another day. What you gonna do? But yeah, back at it with another wrinkly shirt and unwashed hair. So if you pay any attention at all to environmental news, you're probably aware of Costa Rica's very green reputation. In 2015, they pledged to be carbon neutral by 2021. For those of you keeping track, that's in a spicy 6 months. And they're pretty well on their way. They're at about 98% of electricity being produced by renewables. In, I think it was 2018, they went 300 days on only renewable energy for the entire country, which is very impressive. Now, about 65% of that comes from hydro, 15% geothermal, 2% wind, and less than 1% solar. And the reason why it's such a vast majority hydro is because Costa Rica has a lot of rainfall. In fact, the fourth highest nation for rainfall per capita, which means there's lots of rivers with potential for dams. It's also a small country with only 5 million people and not a lot of big industrial outputs, so that makes it a bit easier as well. But a lot of people don't consider hydro as really the best renewable energy option out there because it has some pretty significant drawbacks. It can disrupt aquatic life in a number of ways. Sedimentation means the lifespan of a dam is only going to be a handful of decades, and dams can also produce significant emissions in the form of methane released from decaying vegetation in the reservoir. Some estimates even put it at a higher greenhouse gas impact than a coal power station. One of the biggest challenges facing Costa Rica's green transition is transportation. As cities grew, they didn't do a whole lot of planning for public transportation, and so now there are a lot more cars than the infrastructure can support, and those cars are producing tons of emissions. They're pushing electric cars quite heavily, but in general, people just can't afford them. They're also giving companies tax breaks if they build bike racks and buy bicycles for their employees, and municipalities are required to build bike lanes on all new roads. This doesn't change the fact that the old infrastructure is A, kind of crumbling, and B, just not set up for the most sustainable modes of transportation at this point in time. One really interesting thing about Costa Rica is that they abolished their military in 1948, and they spent that budget on healthcare and education and environmental protection.
Wow, what a novel idea. I wonder what would happen if more countries did that. I wonder what would happen if cities did that with their police forces.
Also, through the 1960s, they gave away small parcels of land, maybe around like 5 to 10 acres, as kind of a cheap form of welfare. The idea was, teach someone to fish rather than just give them a fish, because by giving poor families land, they were able to make a self-sustaining living and control their own destiny. The downside to this approach was it led to very high deforestation rates. So in 1948, the country was 75% forested, but was down to 26% in 1983. However, the resulting economic growth from giving this land away, they invested that money in education and healthcare. So as the economy developed, more people moved to the city with money and skills and education. So by 1996, they could ban clear cutting of mature forests, and now the forest cover is currently at 53%. And they managed to achieve this wonderful growth pretty equitably. The literacy rate in Costa Rica is 97.8%. They have universal health care, which is something the US doesn't have. Their vaccination rates are higher than the US. They have a longer average life expectancy than the US, and only 1.7% of households lack access to potable water. Again, better than the US. They have practically universal cell phone service and rank higher than the US in gender equality and wealth equality, the latter by a lot. They also rank 12th in the world for happiness, 7 spots ahead of the US, despite having the lowest GDP per capita of the top 25 countries. And for me, what this says is you don't need to be wealthy to be happy. The reality is that no one's even trying to achieve happiness without wealth. So yeah, things seem to be working out in the long run with that initial divestment from the military. They've seen economic growth with relative equality and environmental protection.
But Jesse, aren't you against economic growth?
Generally, yes, I believe that infinite economic growth will ultimately be disastrous for the environment. But one of the things that I like about degrowth is that it recognizes that developing countries with high rates of poverty do still need to grow so that everyone can achieve a certain quality of life. And then after that point, growth becomes unnecessary. Now, as wonderful as Costa Rica's progress has been, it's not necessarily an easily replicable model for other developing countries. First of all, colonizers killed off most of the indigenous population rather than enslaving or exploiting them, like in a lot of other regions. The relative racial homogeneity has allowed a stronger democracy to emerge, while many other countries that were colonized are still dealing with racial tensions or other conflict that resulted from that era. Costa Rica also came out of the Cold War relatively unscathed, which is very much so unlike the rest of Central America and a lot of the developing world, to be honest, which have been involved in proxy wars for decades. The small population of Costa Rica also helps, which I think is why it's important to think about sustainability not just on a national level, but also a state/province, county, and city level, because those scales can be a lot more manageable and involve a lot less bureaucracy and politicking to achieve the goals we want to be achieving. And also, obviously, Costa Rica's exceptional rainfall is not going to be replicable everywhere. But there are definitely a few lessons that we can learn from Costa Rica. First, when it comes to renewables, play to your localized strengths. If you don't have heaps of rainfall and rivers, maybe you've got plenty of sunshine or geothermal or wind capacity. And for larger countries, this varies from region to region. You don't need to go all in on just one. Second, democracy is really important. If Costa Rica's farmers and working class hadn't been so strongly represented in the government early on, the elite probably would have pursued a version of growth that resulted in wealth concentrating in their hands versus the relative equality that they have today. Obviously, I'm not saying it's perfectly equal and there's not poverty, and third, defunding the police and the military and investing in communities, probably a really good idea, and it looks like it really has worked. Like with all of my country videos, what's important here is not that Costa Rica is perfect and they've figured it out completely and solved all the world's problems, but that they're trying and they're showing the world what is possible if you really commit to sustainability. So yeah, as always, links to more information and references will be below if you want to learn more. I've been taking a step back from social media lately, but if you want to follow me, the links will be below. As always, you can leave a comment below with your thoughts. I love to engage with other open-minded people and think critically about the challenges that face us. So as long as it is respectful. Bye.